Good morning. Today is the fourth day of Sivan, which is 2 days ahead of Shavuot, and it is the 24th of May. We're up to the fourth reading of Parashat Naso, and the fourth reading is full of three very important topics, all which have to do with the word Nesiat, Tafachim, Nesiah in general, Naso, lifting up. The first topic is the sota, the woman who is accused of an indecent or an improper conduct with another man, a woman who's married and has some kind of improper conduct with another man, and her husband suspects that they also did something that is forbidden. The second topic is the Nazir. Nazir is basically an ascetic, someone who decides to serve God at a higher level, and then he is forbidden from drinking wine and anything that has to do with grape products. And the third topic is a topic that we won't be able to get to this week. We'll have to do it next week on the fourth day. It's a topic of the priestly blessing, which is also in the fourth reading. Okay, so let's start and see how this all connects to our general topic. As you remember, what we're talking about this week in Parshat Nazir is the idea that Parshat Naso is the idea that Naso means to carry opposites, to lift something up, to lift it from the mind to the heart, and in this case to the heart which is higher than the mind, and what is called as the wisdom of the heart. The eyes, mind, and the heart, which is able to sustain opposites, unlike the rational mind, which is unable to sustain opposites. And we also said that this is connected to specifically the week now that we're in, just before Shavuot, the holiday in which we commemorate the giving of the Torah, because the point of the giving of the Torah was to lift the mind to the heart, was to give us a heart in the sense of the ability to sustain opposites. Now there's a lot to be said about it, but we're just going to look at today at these two topics of the sota and the nazir. The woman who is accused of doing something improper, and the Nazarite, the person who decides to be an ascetic and refrain from things that the Torah has permitted. There's an incredible statement. Rashi brings it. It's from the Talmud in the tractate Sota, and there the Talmud asks the question: why are these two issues brought together, one next to another, the Sota and the Nazir? I think sometimes they call it the adulterous woman, but really it's a woman who's only being suspected of something. She's not necessarily adulterous. So why is this woman and the Nazir appearing together back to back in the Torah? The answer that's given by Rabbi Yehuda Anasi, who was the great sage of the 2nd century CE, who compiled the Mishnah as we have it, his statement is, "Haro'eh sota b'kilkula yazir atzmo min hayayin." A person who sees this adulterous or suspected adulterous woman being brought to the temple and having the ritual associated with her conducted, and a person who sees this and feels that this has affected him should become a Nazarite, should refrain from drinking or having any connection to wine. Now this is it's really an astounding statement. Because what is he actually saying? He's saying that there's some connection between the two. That if somehow I saw something extreme in one area of life, I should put myself in an extreme situation in another area of life. That's a very bold statement. What exactly is it saying? When we think about it, the whole direction of Torah seems to be, like Maimonides explains, to walk the middle path, not to act in an extreme way in either case. The sense of, let's call it jealousy, that the suspected adulteress's husband has is certainly not a middle path. It is very extreme. It's coming and saying, just because I saw my wife entering a room with someone, and there was enough time that something could have happened, but I don't know that anything happened. To suspect her, to go in that extreme, and to take her to the temple and have the whole rite conducted with her. And it is an extreme rite, because the sages say if he was suspecting her without cause, and she was actually acting properly, and she didn't do anything wrong, then if until now she had difficulty having children, she now has children easily. If until now she had no children, her womb will be opened and she will have children. If until now her children were born lazy and weak, they become strong. It changes her whole constitution. So it's an extreme act in either direction. If it turns out that the suspicion was true and she did do something, the waters that she is given to drink in the temple end up leading to her death. It's a very extreme ritual. And for a husband to put his wife in that position, even if he's angry at her, even if this, even if that, to take that risk is a very extreme path. In any case, even if someone saw this, he saw this ritual, and he sees the sota in her state during the ritual, which is not a very, it's not an easy state to see, why should he have to push himself in another extreme, which is to refrain from drinking wine, from touching anything that has to do with grapes? And again, Maimonides seems to tell us we should always be following the median, the middle path. So the answer is, in keeping with what we've been discussing all week, that the Torah actually defines two different types of median. And in fact, Maimonides himself, even though he asserts that a person should get to the median, he doesn't teach it that way. Let me give an example. He writes, if you have a tree that's leaning too much in one direction, what you do is you have to push him all the way to the other direction, and over time he'll average out in the middle. The question has to be asked, why not just bring him straight to the middle? If you have a tree that's leaning this way, just bring him straight to the middle. But Maimonides knows, as does everyone who deals with the human constitution, with the human psyche, that if a person is in an extreme in one direction, you can't just move them to the middle. In fact, to correct their posture, to correct their path, you have to move them to the complete other extreme. This is when you want to reach the middle path. To reach the middle path, you have to include both extremes. The middle path is really not there to nullify, to erase the validity of the extreme paths. It's there to say that if you include both extremes properly, then you come to the middle. In other words, if a person finds themselves in a situation where the sota has an effect on them, when they feel that they're connected to this, they have some affinity to it, that maybe they could be jealous at that level, maybe they would strike out to that degree against their spouse, maybe they could be exhibiting that type of behavior. So the person has to take it to heart and say, if that's true about me, then I also have to take into account that the other type of behavior is also true about me, meaning that I could get completely losing myself by drinking wine to inebriation, to being drunk, to becoming an alcoholic, or whatever it is. And so I have to even out both extremes together. The sota and the nazir are actually two extremes. Like we said, we have to be able to carry opposites. And carrying opposites actually leads you to a state that is a new definition of what it means to follow the middle path. Again, a little bit of a comical, but still very insightful understanding of this whole topic. The Kotzker Rebbe was once asked why he doesn't follow the median, why he doesn't follow the medium path. He was always very extreme in everything that he did. And his answer, tongue-in-cheek, was, well, if you look at the roads, and back then that was certainly the case, today we have cars instead of wagons, but in his time, he says, who walks in the middle of the road? The horses do. And who walks on the extremes, on the two sides? Human beings. He says human beings are actually meant to be on the extreme. They have extreme tendencies. There's nothing wrong with it, as long as you have some other extreme that's balancing it out. In other words, the Torah is not trying to make a person what they call cancel culture, that anything that's on the extreme is completely improper and has no place. The Torah wants us to be able to deal with that. To carry opposites means to understand that if you have one extreme, you don't cancel it out and then come to the middle, but rather you have to adopt the other extreme as well, and then you get a balanced reality, a balanced situation, a balanced psyche. This is especially true when we think about politics. There's especially in the land of Israel, everywhere in the democratic world, there's a thought. The thought pattern goes that if you have something that is extreme, it's negative, and therefore it has to be canceled. It has to be taken either out of the law or made into something that is ridiculously impossible to pursue, and so on. But the Torah seems to think that as long as it's not something that's forbidden, even though it's extreme, it's an extreme opinion, it's an extreme thought, and it's an extreme practice. It could be that the person is ultra-Orthodox in a way that nobody can tolerate, but it's not forbidden. It can be the opposite, that the person is extremely tolerant of everything. He's tolerant of rights of those that you think that shouldn't have rights, and everything. He's completely to the left. As long as it's not forbidden, as long as he's not doing something that's forbidden, these two extremes need to be not canceled, but rather weighted against each other to create a harmonious middle. And the only true representation of the spirit of the Jewish people, of the world in general, but especially of the Jewish people, is when we find a way to embrace the two extremes, the Sota and the Nazir, and understand that they balance one another. And without them in the world, eventually a new extreme will be formed anyway, because you can't get rid of the extremes. It's not like if you'll cancel them out, they'll disappear forever. But rather, the Torah wants to teach us to carry the opposites. Carrying the opposites also means to have tolerance, to be able to accept the fact that there are extremes in human nature, there are extremes in politics, there are extremes in society. And the way to deal with them is by including them within the general body and by having them balanced by the opposite extremes and actually having them talk to one another. The middle, the role of the middle is to find a way to include both, to carry both, and then the full gamut of human experience is brought into our lives, into our politics, into how we treat each other, and there's a lot more respect and a lot more of an ability to see the wide range of godliness that appears and manifests through human nature.